Given the roster changes lately for the Montreal Canadiens, there's been a lot of talk about who's going to be on the first power play unit, who's going to be on the second. And depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of different varying ideas. I've got my own, so let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Coach here with another edition of Puck Talk Montreal, and it's been a relatively quiet weekend, but I thought I'd start the week off with a discussion about the Canadiens' power play units and what I think they should look like. And now, I took the weekend to really look at video as far as the Canadiens' power play is concerned, what I thought was good, what I thought was bad, and what I thought could change. And now, I'm no expert when it comes to an NHL power play. I will admit that first and foremost. But I do know how to run a power play. And so I took the time to sit down, look at the power play as it was structured last year, both during the regular season, during the playoffs, and when there were injuries. And I thought, given the current roster, what would be the most effective lineup I could put together so that we can have two power play units that would be dangerous, really dangerous. And so I started my analysis by looking at who was where on the power play. And it starts with Patrik Laine, identified here by number 92. This is the amount of ice that Patrik Laine skates in during the power play. As you can see, from the dot to the corner, up the boards to the top of the circle, and that's it. He doesn't go anywhere else. So one bad side to this, as I show you the first proof of that right here, and that is that look at him. He's at the top of your screen. Puck goes, there's a classic at the dot, bang, scores. That's example number one. I've got a few other ones, but the thing about Laine is it's very rudimentary. It's so stationary, and we don't know whether or not that was because of his injury or whether or not it was a preference on his part. Given his history with both Columbus and Winnipeg, I would say it's preference, but we had seen him score a few goals off the rush when he was with Winnipeg. Here's another goal where he pokes his stick into the slot and skates right back out, top of the circle. There he is at the dot, rip, scores. And it got me to thinking, do we really need somebody who's that stationary on the power play? When you look at the movement from the other guys, all other four guys are moving around. You see Suzuki permutating. Here could a puck over the line, bang, scores. Again at the dot. And that's what kind of gets to me, is the other guys are doing all the work and Laine is just sitting there ready to pull the trigger. Here's the last example. Suzuki, back down to Hutson, to Suzuki, over to Laine, bang, scores. That was actually his hat trick goal against the Buffalo Sabres. All of them almost identical. Shot from the dot or beyond into the back of the net. Nothing as far as passing, nothing as far as being able to feed his teammates, the point, etc. So then I had to take a look really hard at Cole Caufield, identified here by number 13, obviously, and look at the area that he covers. And this isn't just exaggeration. He actually does go all the way back to the point to give an option to Hutson when Hutson's in trouble. You didn't see that from Laine. You also see him go down to the net front, also to the bumper. Here's an example of his bumper play. He's at the side of the net right now, as you can see him. Comes back to the point. Hutson spots him, rips one towards the net, deflected, scores. And that's what you want to see when you look at a player on that side of the ice. You don't want him to be stuck. Because all you got to do at that point, as is the case with Laine, is put one player on him and you effectively eliminate him as a threat. Right? As long as you have somebody shadowing him all the time on the power play or being relatively close to him, his effectiveness comes down to almost zero. That's why in the past, I would say 20 years, when we looked at the Canadiens' power play and how shitty it was all because the players are too stationary. They weren't moving around. Ever since Alex Burrows went to player development and Marty St. Louis took it upon himself to take over the power play, we've seen a lot more as far as movement, a lot more as far as positional changes, and a lot more as far as creativity is concerned. something that under the past coaching of the Montreal Canadiens was extremely rigid and didn't allow for any outside the box thinking for the players. Here's another example of a Caufield goal. And this one's pretty, he goes out to the side, all the way to the goal line, takes one shot, then two scores. And again, it comes down to the fact that Caufield, like anybody else, doesn't bury himself to just one scoring position, because then you become predictable. And if you become predictable, you become covered, period. Here's a last example of a Caufield goal. And this one, he bounces out of the bumper, backs into his shooting position, skates in, gets the puck, backs up a bit to give him some space, scores. That's Caufield. He moves. He doesn't stay in one spot. He saw he didn't have a great shot. He backed off the defenseman a little bit, gave himself some time, made sure the goalie was down, ripped it into the back of the net. And so when you look at Caufield and the position that he takes up, that's a lot of space to cover, and he does it extremely well, as was the case with the power play goals that he scored last season. Then, on the opposite side, you've got Nick Suzuki. And now Suzuki, I put him on the opposite side because the videos I found only had him scoring from those particular positions. But the one thing about Suzuki that's different from all the other players on the ice is he tends to travel a lot more. So he takes up the entirety of the offensive zone as opposed to being in one spot. Why? Because not only he, but Lane Hutson are the quarterbacks in the Canadiens' power play. They're the ones that drive the offense. They're the ones that create the plays, make the passes to open up their shooters. Now, Suzuki oftentimes scores from the right side. Here he gets a pass from Matheson, steps in, look, doesn't shoot, backhand, scores. This next example is pretty sweet too. Gets it. Okay, he'll get a pass back here from Hutson, looks, slot, fires, scores. And that's it about Suzuki. He's got that good wrist shot, good release, pinpoint accuracy. So you want him to shoot. Now, he's shooting from an angle that's not favorable because he's on his right side and shooting from the right side. So the angle towards the net is a little bit more difficult. And you see that here as he scores from a wider angle. Puck's along the far boards. Everybody forgets about Suzuki, gets the puck at the dot, fires, scores. And, that's pretty much where you look at it as far as the Canadiens' power play is concerned. There is also Lane Hutson. And you look at Slafkovsky, who also scored quite a few power play goals from near the net front. So, in these variances of plays, you also saw Slafkovsky back up to go to the dot on the right-hand side and score from there. There's a lot to be said about the different variances on the Canadiens' power play. And so when I looked at it and I thought to myself, how do you structure a power play to be successful? And I actually wrote about this years ago, not only for a site called A Winning Habit, but also previously for Rick Stevens and allhabs.net. And I wrote it, I would say back in, I think, 2008, 2009. And the truth holds firm today. There are three different components that you need on a power play. You need a pair of shooters, a pair of playmakers, and a net front presence. That's my philosophy for a good power play. That doesn't mean that your playmakers don't shoot, but it means that you got two guys that are primarily there to rip the puck on net. You've also got two guys that are on the ice that have the ability to quarterback the power play, not only by creating plays, but also by moving around and creating space for themselves to open up passing lanes. And then you've got the guy in front who's either big, small, whatever the case, who's not worried about taking shots to the back and is willing to take the hits to score goals in front and wreak havoc on opposing goaltenders in defense. Sound familiar? Let's take a look at how I structured the Canadiens' power play. The first unit is relatively simple. You've got Caufield, not Laine, because of the fact that Caufield moves around a hell of a lot more than Laine. I've got Caufield on the first unit. On the left, Suzuki up the middle, Demidov on the right, Hutson at the point, and Slafkovsky at the net. Now, of course, given the different situations and the ability to move around for these forwards, you may very well find Caufield in the bumpers, Suzuki on the right, Demidov on the left. It all depends on the situation. You can also have Hutson come down the right side, be replaced by Demidov at the point, or Suzuki, or even Caufield. There are so many different variances when you look at this. And that's the best part of that power play. When you look at it, you've got everything that I've asked for. You've got the guy in front of the net, you've got the shooters, and you've got the quarterbacks. You've got Demidov and Caufield as your shooters. You've got Hutson and Suzuki as your playmakers. And you've got Slafkovsky in front of the net. It's relatively simple. The formula works. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be out there saying, yeah, but Patrick Laine scored 18 goals on the power play. Well, that's because they were feeding Laine nonstop on that side. And yes, his success rate, very good. But there's also times where he missed the net, where shots got blocked because they were predictable. There was no variance. So there's good and bad with having Patrick Laine on that side. And when you're talking about the number one unit who you think should have more success than others, then you have to put Cole Caufield on that first unit. Then when you look at the second unit, here's where the fun starts. I've got Noah Dobson at the point. I've got Mike Matheson on the right. Patrick Laine on the left. Kirby Dach in the middle. That's assuming he's healthy. And, of course, Brendan Gallagher at the net front. Now, here's the fun part about this. It's the Matheson thing. Right? A lot of you are going to say, Mike Matheson on the right side on the power play? Yes. Why? Well, because if you take a look at the structure as it is, Dobson is not your playmaker on the power play. Dobson is a shooter. So when you have guys that need to feed the puck, you can alternate between Dobson and Matheson at the point. You could drop Dobson down to the right-hand side, put Matheson at the point, and it gives you options. Kirby Dach, he's the guy that's going to be able to move the puck around, shoot occasionally, but more often than not, try to create offense. Laine is your pure shooter, and Gallagher, of course, is your pest in front of the net. Now, granted, the Canadiens have picked up Zach Bolduc, and he is pretty good on the power play, but am I ready to anoint him as the answer on the Canadiens power play right out of camp? Maybe after the exhibition season, if I see him on the power play and what he's able to do. But given Matheson's history and given what he gave up last season in giving his spot to Hutson, I thought that maybe keeping him on that second unit as opposed to just putting Dobson there might be the right way to handle Matheson to keep him happy, especially at the trade deadline, until the trade deadline, I should say, while he continues to build his value. You're giving him a different role on that power play as opposed to being the guy solely at the point. You're allowing him to skate. You're allowing him to move around the zone, and he likes doing that. And by having Matheson out there as well, you know that he's going to be just as much as the defensive conscience as Dobson when it comes to having both Laine and Kirby Dach out there. Now, you have to bear in mind, my thinking here also involves the fact that the second unit doesn't get nearly as much power play time as the first. So why not have two defensemen on the second unit? It's not going to hurt anybody. If they're out there for, let's say, 45 seconds to a minute, then, they're going to be out there and they're going to be able to produce even if there's two defensemen on the ice. You've got a defenseman who's shown that he's got offensive aptitudes, not only in Matheson, but also in Dobson. Dobson can get the shot on goal. He doesn't miss the net as often as perhaps a Shea Weber used to do it. Dobson's shot gets through. Gallagher's at the front of the net. Dach is in, let's say, the bumper, or he's moving around. And the nice thing about Dach, too, is you can, because he's a right-handed shot, you can interchange them and try to get Laine to move into the bumper and earn a spot on that first power play unit. The whole thing is I want Laine to move around a little bit more. I don't want him to be so stationary, because if he's stationary, he effectively takes himself out of the play, especially when he's outside the dots. There's a thing about the power play that I like my guys to do, and I probably didn't put it up here for all the wrong reasons, but when you look at the ice as a whole, now ignore Laine, but you look at the ice itself. And the one thing that you want to be able to do is be able to shift your power play between the dot on the near side, which would be the lower side of this graphic, assuming that the puck is up on Laine's stick. You want to be able to shift it as close to the net as possible to reduce the amount of ice you have to move the puck through. If you're always wide and you're outside the dots, it makes the defensive team's job that much easier. The more you contract your power play, the more the defense forces to contract. So if you're able to open up a little bit after you force them to contract, then you open up space for your shooters and your playmakers. Think of it like a heartbeat, right? When your heart pumps and provides blood, it pumps out when it contracts and it draws in when it expands, right? So if you contract and you force the D to contract their diamond or box, whatever they prefer to play, and then suddenly extract and move the puck, you expand and they don't know where to go first. The puck's going to go to, let's say, for argument's sake, to a Demidov. And as they shift over to Demidov, you know that you've got Caufield on the opposite side moving inside the dot to give himself space. Point Hutson over to Caufield, one-timer from a better shooting angle, closer to the hash mark as opposed to the dot. Those are the variances in the power play you need to see to be successful. Movement, switching of positions, being able to create offense from both sides of the ice. You're not limited to that because Caufield is a better playmaker, I think, than Lane is. So you also have that factor in there if you need it. So let's put it all together. First unit, here you go. Hutson at the point, Caufield, Suzuki, and Demidov as your forwards, along with Slafkovsky at the net. Your second unit, Gallagher at the net, Line, Doc, and Matheson through the middle, and Dobson at the blue line. Both of those particular scenarios could bring you success. And again, I'm not close to the idea of putting Bolduc in Matheson's spot. But I like the idea of having Matheson as a second defenseman on the second unit, especially at the tail end of a penalty. Having the two defensemen on the ice also allows you to be a little bit more defensively responsible, even if you're coming off a power play. And you don't have to worry about getting a forward off the ice to get an extra defenseman on. Think about it. Give me your ideas. Put it in the comments. I don't think I'm out of left field here. And again, try to structure it the way I'm talking about. Two shooters, or as they say in French, deux francs-tireurs, right? Two playmakers and a net front presence. That's how I like to structure my power play. If you like to structure it differently, put it in there. But if you want to use my template for a power play, try to pick what you think are the top two units that you would put out there. Let's have some fun with this. And if I see a few different variances, I'll bring it back and we'll talk about it again. Don't forget, be sure to give me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe if you want to, if you want to get notified for more content on the page. We'll talk next time.